Chancellor Woodson, a delight to talk with you today about your efforts at NC State in internationalizing the university. Let me begin by asking you how you would describe the responsibility of higher education leaders today to internationalize their universities.
Well, there are very few things that are more important. Our students really demand and should demand an international experience, a curriculum that helps them prepare for an increasingly global marketplace. And our approaches to internationalization all feed into the educational mission of the institution. It's a very flat world, and our students expect to experience the world, and if they don't have an opportunity at a university, then where will they have the opportunity? So I think all of us in higher education, really it's incumbent upon us to help students really come away with an improved global perspective and the ability to work across a global marketplace.
What does the awarding of the Paul Simon recognition to NC State mean to your institution?
You know, it's huge for us. We've had a long-standing tradition of being very international in our scope and in our focus, but in recent years it's really become a central strategy for the institution. Bai Lian Lee, the Vice Provost for International Affairs, has been focused on bringing international understanding to a central theme in our five-part strategic plan. So to get recognized in this way for a lot of people's hard work is really something very exciting for NC State and a great reflection on all of the efforts of our institution across the board. All 10 of our colleges, our graduate school, all of our faculty, and all the leaders across the university.
Let me ask you to describe in somewhat more detail the shift from being a university that was international, as you've characterized it, to a university that now is strategically focused on internationalization. What's the difference? Can you help others understand it?
I'd say the big difference is that we have 2,000 faculty, and the way I like to describe it is when you have 2,000 faculty, you have 2,000 centers of excellence. And our faculty are from all over the world, so they bring with them relationships back at home institutions. And there are collaborations that our faculty have around the world. And it's a big part of the research and extension and education mission of a land-grant university like NC State. But as a result of the decentralized approach, we had hundreds of MOUs with institutions around the world. And these typically involved one or two faculty members in a collaboration with their colleagues at another institution. So to make it strategic for us was, we're not trying to get away from helping faculty establish those relationships, but we want a much smaller number of very intense, very strategically focused, and very deep and broad partnerships around the world. And so we now have just about 20 strategic partners around the world that have very deep relationships with NC State that go beyond a single faculty member. And that's being strategic. Another thing for us that's being strategic is saying that we want our students to have a broad international experience before they graduate. With a college that's dominated by science and technology and engineers, those students typically feel that an interruption of their education through an international experience can disrupt their educational mission. So we've been very strategic about thinking about our curriculum and how we can incorporate international experiences into the broad-based education that students, even in the College of Engineering, are experiencing.
So describe a typical partnership between NC State and another international institution. What are the elements of that partnership? How does that partnership manifest itself in terms of faculty, staff, and students at NC State?
It usually starts with shared missions. That is, we have similar goals as an institution, we have similar academic strength, and we're addressing similar problems. So, as you might expect, we have a lot of partners around the world that have inherent strength in agriculture, in engineering, in textiles. We're one of the dominant colleges of textiles in America, and yet textiles is a global phenomenon, a global marketplace. So typically it starts with common research, common educational interest, and common missions and goals. Beyond that, it really, we seek to involve more than a single college, more than a single department, faculty from across the institution, and we try to make the partnerships deep and meaningful, not only exchange of our faculty and our students, but also sharing and research ideas and working on common problems across the globe, and in some cases applying for grants together.
You've described your university as decentralized. The colleges have a fair degree of autonomy, I would expect. So how did you march forward and provide incentives or create the desirability for these colleges, their deans, faculties, to participate in this internationalization effort?
I think the most important thing, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, is that we made it a priority for the institution. We made it part of the strategic plan, part of the goals of the institution. So the Chancellor, the Provost, and others stood up and said, this is important. The second thing we did was we put resources behind that. And Dr. Lee, through the International Programs Office, has grants, seed grants, that he can provide to faculty that attempt to strengthen partnerships around the globe. We've been growing study abroad through investments in endowment and also investments. Every year I get money that comes to me as unrestricted money from donors, and I've made investing in study abroad and internationalization a priority for those funds. So you put resources around it. And then we're an entrepreneurial institution, and one of the things that we've done is we've sought a lot of grant funding that supports our international agenda, and not just research. I mean, one example is a faculty member recently received a large Gates Foundation grant for very targeted international research in Africa. But we've also sought and received funding for internationalizing the curricula. So, you know, as a university, you're constantly thinking about how can you mobilize your resources and leverage them to bring new opportunities.
If you ran into a colleague, President, Chancellor of an institution with a similar mission to your esteemed institution, and they said to you, Randy, what should I do if I'm interested as a president or chancellor and going back to my university and making that university pursue comprehensive internationalization? What should I do as the CEO?
Well, I think the most important thing a CEO should do is talk about it and make it a priority and speak about it as though it's important, because it is important to the institution. So first, make it a priority and make it a very visible priority. And then put strategies around that priority. For us, a strategy that was critically important was to be more strategic in our international partnerships. And finally, you have to find the resources to put around these efforts. In our state, we're a public institution, so as a public institution, you're always accountable to the public for the role that you play. It's a little easier for us being in Research Triangle Park and having companies like IBM and Cisco and others that hire our graduates articulating an international vision and not getting pushback on that from the public because they get it. That's not always the case, depending on where your institution is located, in what state it is, and what's the current state of the economy. But for us, our state, and particularly our region, understands the global economy and sees NC State as being a big part of the driver. Our governor calls on us frequently in international collaborations that have the potential to stimulate the economy of North Carolina.
Can you provide some stories, the narratives of individuals, students, faculty, perhaps staff, who've been caught up in the institution's internationalization efforts and whose life trajectory has been altered, redirected, perhaps just even so slightly? How do we understand it from a human standpoint, what internationalization means?
Well, I don't think there's anything more transformational in a student experience than a deep and meaningful international experience. Particularly for a young person that grows up in the rural parts of North Carolina. I talked to a student last night. We have a leadership group that meets at the residence with my wife and myself once a month. And this group was over last night, and there was this young woman that's a sophomore studying polymer and color chemistry from one of the most rural and most poverty-stricken counties in the state of North Carolina. And this last year, she studied in Peru as part of one of our study abroad. And this young woman is forever changed. Everything about her world and what she envisions doing in the future is colored through different glasses now. And you know, things have opened up to her in a way that only that kind of experience can cultivate.
Any similar stories in terms of faculty research and service or community engagement activities?
Craig Incho, a professor of horticulture, is a sweet potato breeder. We're #1, by the way, in sweet potatoes in North Carolina. And for the last few years, he's been working on developing sweet potato varieties that for sub-Saharan Africa. And he's been in Africa, particularly in Uganda, many times. And because sweet potato is a high calorie crop and also high nutrient, beta carotene in particular, it has a lot of potential to satisfy a lot of caloric and nutrient needs in some very difficult parts of the world. His research, the entire way he thinks about improving that crop, not only for North Carolina, but now for the world, was colored by his international experience.
So roll the clock forward. In 5 years from now, how will NC State be different than it is today because of your continued focus on internationalizing the institution?
5 years from now, I'm confident that as a result of our keen focus on internationalization, we'll see a large and strong population of international students on our campus. That's grown each year in the last 5 years, and it continues to do so. I also believe we'll see a larger percentage of our undergraduates graduating with a deep and meaningful international experience. And as a result, I think their opportunities in the workplace will be greater. They'll make more money, they'll be happier, the world will be wonderful. But seriously, I think what I would expect to see 5 years from now is that we're going to have very deep and meaningful partnerships with a handful of institutions around the world. Currently, that's around 20 institutions. I wouldn't expect to see that number grow dramatically, but I would expect to see it change with the evolution of our relationships. And finally, I would expect to see the portfolio of research at our institution more informed by the global needs and global funding opportunities because of the seed grants that Dr. Lee is providing through the Vice Provost Office and other opportunities that we're making available to our faculty to get engaged internationally.
If a colleague in leadership at another institution asked you if they should apply to have their institution's internationalization efforts considered for the Paul Simon Award, what would you say to them?
If I had a chance to talk to a colleague of mine about applying for the Paul Simon Award, there's no question that I would do so. First and foremost, if internationalization is important to you and your job and to your campus, and I know it is, then it's important to recognize all those people that work hard every day to make that vision a reality. And applying for an award like this, number one, says a lot to the people that work at your institution about the importance of their work. And number two, it helps you to sharpen your focus. It's a self-evaluative process that says, are we having an impact? Are we doing everything that we can to internationalize the institution?